The city was alive that Christmas Eve. Strings of golden lights hung from lampposts, snowflakes drifted lazily down from the dark sky, and shop windows glowed with festive cheer. Families walked hand in hand, carrying bags of last-minute gifts, while carolers sang on corners. For most people, it was a night of joy, laughter, and warmth. But for Anjali, it was another night of survival. Her red coat was old and worn, the fabric thin in places where the wind cut through. She stood beside a green trash bin at the edge of a decorated city street, clutching an old diary to her chest. That diary was the only possession she guarded fiercely. It held memories of her late mother, the one person who had always told her that honesty and kindness were worth more than gold. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, yet she hesitated before digging through the bin. She wasn't searching for treasure, nor money, nor valuables. She was simply hoping to find a piece of bread, maybe an apple someone had discarded, anything to quiet the hunger for a little while. Her hand rested on the rim of the bin, and she whispered softly to herself, "Don't lose hope, Anjali. Tomorrow will be better." Behind her, a man and a little girl stopped in their tracks. Arjun, dressed in a long black coat dusted with snow, held the small hand of his daughter Mira. At just 7 years old, Mira's bright eyes widened as she tugged at her father's sleeve. "Papa, why is that lady looking through the trash? Doesn't she have a home?" Arjun's heart tightened. He was a millionaire by every measure. CEO of a tech company, owner of several properties, a man who had built wealth from nothing. Yet he carried loneliness in his heart. His wife had passed away years earlier, leaving him to raise Mira alone. Despite all the riches, the holidays always felt incomplete. He watched the young woman in the red coat, her posture proud even in her struggle. Something about her aura struck him, an unbroken spirit in the face of hardship. "Stay here, Mira," he said gently, releasing his daughter's hand. "I'll be right back." Arjun walked toward Anjali. His polished shoes crunched in the snow, and she turned quickly, startled, clutching her diary tighter against her chest. For a moment, she thought he might scold her, as many had before. Shopkeepers, passers-by, even security guards. People rarely saw the person behind the hunger. But Arjun's voice was calm. "Are you all right?" Anjali straightened, brushing snow from her coat. She didn't want pity. "Yes, I'm fine. Just looking." "Looking for what?" His question wasn't sharp, it was curious, almost gentle. Anjali hesitated. Her pride wrestled with her reality. Then, with a soft sigh, she answered honestly, "For something to eat. But don't worry, I won't make a mess. I never do." Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed the pain of hunger and the weight of nights spent under the open sky. Arjun studied her carefully. He was used to people hiding behind lies, chasing after his money, pretending to be something they weren't. Yet here was a young woman, admitting her need without begging, without deception. There was dignity in her honesty. Mira, unable to contain her innocence, ran up and stood beside him. "Papa," she whispered loudly, "can we help her? Please." Anjali blinked in surprise, then smiled softly at the little girl. "You're very kind, sweetheart, but I'll be fine. There are others who need help more than me." Those words stunned Arjun. Here was someone clearly struggling, yet her first thought was of others. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. He held it out toward her. "Take this," he said. "Get yourself a warm meal tonight." Anjali looked at the bill, then at him. Slowly, she shook her head. "Thank you, but I can't." "You can't." Arjun's brow furrowed. He was not used to hearing that word. "I don't take money I haven't earned," Anjali explained softly. "If you want to give me work, I'll do it. But I can't just take." Her words carried no bitterness, only quiet resolve. She was cold, hungry, standing in the snow on Christmas Eve, and still, she clung to her integrity. For the first time in years, Arjun felt something stir in his heart. Respect, admiration, and a deep curiosity. "Work?" he asked. "Yes," Anjali nodded. "I can clean, cook, run errands. I can take care of children or the elderly. I'll do anything, but I won't lose my dignity." Arjun studied her in silence for a long moment. Snowflakes swirled around them, the distant hum of carols filling the air. He realized then that fate had led him here, not just to witness a woman in need, but to meet someone unlike anyone else he had ever known. He put the money back into his coat pocket. "All right," he said quietly. "If it's work you want, we'll see about that." Anjali lowered her gaze, unsure if she could trust his words. People had promised help before only to disappear. But there was something in his voice, steady, firm, genuine, that made her wonder if this man was different. Mira slipped her small hand into Anjali's. "Don't worry," she said with a child's certainty. "Papa always keeps his promises." For the first time that night, warmth spread through Anjali's chest. Not from food, nor shelter, but from the kindness of strangers on a snowy Christmas Eve. And so began a story neither Arjun nor Anjali could have imagined. A story of tests, of trust, of dignity and love. Snow crunched beneath their feet as Arjun led his daughter and the mysterious young woman through the glowing streets. The Christmas lights reflected in the shop windows. The sound of distant church bells ringing midnight carried through the cold air. Anjali walked a few paces behind, her diary clutched tightly in her left hand. She had agreed reluctantly to follow. Trust was not something she gave easily anymore. Too many people had turned her away. Too many promises had ended in humiliation. And yet, something about Arjun felt different. Maybe it was the steady tone of his voice, or the way his daughter had looked at her with such unfiltered kindness. When they reached the sleek black car waiting at the corner, Anjali froze. Its polished surface gleamed under the streetlights, the logo on the hood unmistakable. She realized then that the man she was walking with was not an ordinary stranger. He was wealthy, very wealthy. Her first instinct was to step back. Wealthy people had never meant good news in her life. They had judged her, ignored her, dismissed her as though she didn't exist. Why should this man be any different? But then she looked at Mira, who was smiling at her with innocent trust. That little girl believed her father's words. She believed Anjali would be safe. And Anjali could not bear to disappoint that trust. They drove through the city in silence, the glow of skyscrapers passing by. At last, the car pulled up in front of a large house at the edge of the city. A mansion draped with Christmas lights, glowing like a jewel in the snowy night. Anjali's breath caught. Never had she been so close to a home like this. "Come inside," Arjun said simply, stepping out and offering her a hand. For a moment Anjali hesitated. Then, with quiet dignity, she followed. Inside, the warmth of the house enveloped her. The faint scent of pine drifted from the towering Christmas tree in the living room. Stockings hung neatly over the fireplace. A tray of cookies sat on the table, and golden light spilled across the polished wooden floors. Felt like stepping into another world. Mira ran ahead, placing her little boots by the door and spinning toward Anjali. "You can stay here tonight, right, Papa?" Arjun gave a small smile. "For tonight, yes." Anjali lowered her gaze. "Thank you," she whispered, though the words felt too small compared to the gesture. "Sit," Arjun said, gesturing toward the sofa. "I'll get you something to eat." Within minutes, a steaming plate of food was placed before her. Roast chicken, potatoes, warm bread, and a bowl of soup. Her hands trembled as she picked up the spoon. She wanted to devour it all, but she forced herself to eat slowly with grace. Dignity, always dignity. Arjun watched carefully, saying little. He was not simply offering her food, he was studying her, testing her. And when she finished, he leaned back in his chair and asked, "Do you need money, Anjali?" Her head lifted sharply. "No," she said firmly. "Why not? You could use it. You're hungry, homeless. Money would solve that." She placed her spoon down gently. Money doesn't solve everything. It only hides problems for a little while. What I need is a chance to work. A chance to prove myself. Arjun studied her in silence. Then, slowly, he pulled a crisp stack of $100 bills from his coat pocket and placed it on the table in front of her. "Take it," he said. Her eyes flickered to the money. The weight of hunger, the memory of cold nights on the street, pressed against her heart. That much cash could buy her food for months, even rent for a small room. But her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "Dignity is worth more than gold, my child. Never trade it for survival." She pushed the money back toward him. "I told you, I don't take what I haven't earned." Arjun's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in curiosity. Most people would have snatched it without a second thought. "I'm not most people," Anjali said softly. Later that night, after Mira had gone to bed, Arjun returned to the living room. He placed something else on the table in front of her, this time a delicate gold chain. Anjali frowned. "What is this?" "Another chance," Arjun said. "Take it. It's worth more than the cash I offered. You could sell it, start over." Anjali picked it up gently, letting the gold glimmer in the firelight. For a moment, she traced the fine links between her fingers. It was beautiful, far beyond anything she had ever owned. Then she closed her hand around it and placed it back on the table. "I told you already. I won't take what isn't mine. If you want me to earn something, I'll do it. But I won't accept gifts like this." Arjun leaned forward, his gaze sharp, almost testing the limits of her resolve. "Do you know how many people would betray their principles for less than this? And yet you refuse again and again." Anjali met his gaze steadily. "Because if I take it, I'll lose the only thing I have left, my integrity. And without that, I'm nothing." For a long moment, silence hung in the air. The fire crackled softly in the hearth. Snow continued to fall beyond the windows. Then, for the first time that evening, Arjun's stern expression softened. He leaned back in his chair and let out a quiet laugh. Not mocking, but filled with something like relief. "You are exactly the kind of person I've been looking for," he said. Anjali blinked in confusion. "Looking for?" "Yes," Arjun said firmly. "Someone honest. Someone who cannot be bought. I don't need another employee who chases after my money. I need someone I can trust with my home, with my daughter. And you, Anjali, you've already passed the first test." Her breath caught. "First test." Arjun nodded. "There will be more. I need to be sure. But if you succeed, then perhaps your life will never be the same again." Anjali sat back, stunned. She had no idea what kind of path she had just stepped onto. But one thing was certain, her integrity, the very thing that had made her life so hard until now, had finally opened a door she had never dreamed would exist. And in the quiet warmth of that Christmas Eve, beside the firelight, Anjali felt hope flicker back to life. The morning after Christmas Eve, Anjali awoke to something she hadn't felt in years: warmth. The crackling fire had dimmed, but the comfort of a roof over her head and the scent of freshly baked bread drifting from the kitchen was enough to make her feel as though she were dreaming. She sat up on the couch where she had slept, clutching her old diary against her chest. "Don't get used to this," she told herself. "It's temporary." Still, her heart fluttered with gratitude. When she stepped into the kitchen, she found Mira sitting at the table, swinging her little legs, humming a Christmas tune while eating toast with jam. Arjun stood at the counter, a coffee cup in hand, his eyes drifting to the morning newspaper. He looked up when Anjali entered. "Good morning," he said simply. "Good morning," she replied, her voice soft, almost hesitant. "Sit," he gestured. "Eat." A plate of toast, eggs, and warm milk was set before her. She ate quietly, conscious of his watchful eyes. She wondered if every word she spoke, every gesture she made, was being weighed. After breakfast, Arjun folded his newspaper and leaned forward. "Anjali, I promised you work. I'm a man of my word." She straightened, her heart pounding. "You'll start here," he continued, "in my home, cleaning, helping with meals, and sometimes helping Mira. Nothing beyond what you're comfortable with. I'll pay you fairly." Her eyes widened. "You'd really trust me with your home?" "That's exactly what I intend to find out," Arjun said, his tone calm but firm. "Trust is not given freely. It is earned." Anjali nodded, accepting his words. For her, it was more than a job. It was a chance. The first daily test. Later that afternoon, while tidying the study, Anjali found an envelope lying on the desk. It had slipped halfway out of a drawer, almost as though it had been placed there intentionally. Inside was a thick stack of bills, far more than she had ever seen in her life. Her breath caught. Her hands trembled as she slid the envelope back into the drawer and closed it firmly. She didn't even count the money. She didn't need to. Arjun, watching from the hallway unseen, felt the corner of his lips lift. She had passed another test, the second daily test. A few days later, he left his expensive wristwatch on the kitchen counter while pretending to take a phone call in the other room. The watch was sleek, adorned with diamonds, worth more than what most people could earn in a year. When Anjali came in to wipe the counters, she noticed it. For a moment, she froze, the diamonds catching the morning light. She gently picked it up and set it aside, high on a shelf, muttering to herself, "Such things should not be left lying around carelessly." She never even considered keeping it. When Arjun returned, he saw where she had placed it. Again she had passed, the test of compassion. But perhaps the greatest test wasn't about money or gold, it was about compassion. One snowy evening, as Anjali walked home from the marketplace with groceries Arjun had asked her to buy, she spotted an elderly beggar sitting by the roadside, shivering, his hands bare against the snow. Without hesitation, she removed her only scarf, the one possession keeping her warm, and wrapped it gently around his shoulders. "You'll freeze," the old man whispered. "I'll be fine," Anjali said with a gentle smile. "But you need this more than I do." What she didn't know was that Arjun's driver had been following her, watching from a distance. When he later reported what he had seen, Arjun sat in silence for a long time, staring into the fire in his study. This woman, who had nothing, still gave away the little she had. Life in the mansion. Days turned into weeks, and slowly Anjali became part of the household rhythm. She would sweep the polished floors, help cook meals, and sometimes read stories to Mira before bed. Mira grew attached quickly, often running to Anjali with her small hands outstretched, begging for another bedtime tale. Anjali would sit on the rug beside the fire, her voice soft as she read aloud from children's books. Arjun often stood in the doorway silently observing. He saw how gently Anjali cared for his daughter, how naturally kindness flowed from her. Not once did she ask for more pay, or for comfort, or for gifts. She only asked for the dignity of work, and she gave it wholeheartedly. Yet, despite the growing trust, Arjun continued his quiet tests. He had seen too many people betray him in the past. Employees who had stolen, friends who had lied, even relatives who had tried to take advantage of him. His wealth was both his shield and his curse. But Anjali was different, and every test only deepened that truth. The midnight conversation. One night, unable to sleep, Arjun found Anjali sitting in the living room, her diary open in her lap. She was writing by the glow of the Christmas lights still hanging on the mantel. "What do you write in there?" he asked quietly. Startled, she closed it quickly, clutching it to her chest. "Memories. Promises. My mother told me to always keep my heart honest, and my diary helps me remember that." Arjun stepped closer. "Even when life gives you nothing? Especially then," she said softly. "Because honesty is the only thing no one can take from you." Her words struck him deeply. He realized then that Anjali wasn't just passing his tests. She was teaching him something he had nearly forgotten. That integrity, compassion, and love mattered more than any fortune. That night, as he returned to his room, Arjun knew the truth in his heart. He had set out to test her, but it was he who was being tested. And for the first time in years, the millionaire single dad felt hope rising again. Not for wealth, not for success, but for something far rarer, trust. Winter lingered long after Christmas. The snow had thickened on the roads, and icicles hung like glass daggers from the mansion's roof. Inside, the fireplace crackled, filling the house with warmth, laughter, and the soft rhythm of routine. By now, Anjali was no longer just a guest. She rose early to prepare breakfast, helped Mira with her studies, and kept the house shining with care. Her hands bore the marks of work, but her heart carried peace. For the first time in years, she felt she belonged somewhere. Yet, in Arjun's heart, one final storm brewed. The conversation. Late one evening, when Mira had gone to bed, Arjun called Anjali to his study. His face was thoughtful, serious. "You've proven something I never expected," he began slowly. "You've turned down money, jewelry, and comfort. You've shown compassion even when you had nothing. But there's one more thing I must know." Anjali tilted her head, wary but calm. "Another test?" "Yes," Arjun admitted. "Not because I doubt you, but because trust, true trust, is built in fire." Her brow furrowed slightly. "And what is this test?" "You'll see," he said, his voice grave. The ordeal. The next morning, Arjun deliberately staged a scene. He asked Anjali to accompany him to his company headquarters. The building was sleek, filled with glass walls and bustling employees in suits. It was a world far removed from the snow, the diary, the old red coat. As they entered, whispers spread quickly. Who was this woman in a simple dress beside the millionaire CEO? Curious stares followed her, some sharp, some mocking. Anjali kept her head high, her dignity intact, but her heart pounded in her chest. In the boardroom, Arjun laid out a tray on the long polished table. On it sat bundles of cash, tens of thousands of dollars, and beside them, a diamond necklace that sparkled under the fluorescent lights. The executives in the room watched with raised brows as Arjun turned to Anjali. "This," he said loudly enough for all to hear, "is for you. Take it, and you'll never worry about survival again." The room fell silent. Dozens of eyes pinned her in place. Anjali's throat tightened. She felt the weight of every gaze, every judgment. The money could change her life. The necklace could buy her security for years. But her mother's words echoed again. "Never trade your dignity for gold." Slowly, she shook her head. "No." A murmur rippled through the room. The executives whispered in disbelief. "No?" Arjun pressed, his voice sharp now, testing harder than ever. "You mean to tell me you would rather remain poor, uncertain, than accept this gift?" "Yes," Anjali said firmly, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "Because if I take it without earning it, I will lose myself. And I'd rather starve than live without my honor." The room was frozen in stunned silence. Even the skeptical executives found themselves leaning forward, struck by the strength in her voice. The ultimate twist. Arjun let the silence stretch before leaning back in his chair. A slow, almost triumphant smile spread across his face. That, he said finally, was the answer I was waiting for. Anjali blinked, confusion flickering in her eyes. What? He gestured toward the employees in the room. All of them. They thought you would take the money. They bet on it. They whispered that a poor woman could never resist such wealth. But you proved them wrong. You proved me right. Anjali's lips parted, stunned. This was all a test? Yes, Arjun said quietly, but his tone carried deep respect. The final one. He stood, his eyes meeting hers with a steadiness that made her heart pound. Anjali, I didn't bring you here to shame you. I brought you here to show myself that people like you still exist. People who cannot be bought. People who value integrity above all else. The executives shifted uncomfortably, some looking away in embarrassment. They had judged too quickly, measured too harshly. Anjali lowered her gaze, overwhelmed. Why would you go to such lengths? Arjun's voice softened. Because I needed someone like you, not just for my home, not just for my daughter, but for my life. The quiet aftermath. On the drive back to the mansion, the world outside blurred with falling snow. Anjali sat in silence, still reeling from what had happened. She had walked into the lion's den, surrounded by wealth and power, and walked out with nothing but her dignity. And somehow, it felt like everything. Arjun broke the silence. Do you know what you taught me today? She glanced at him cautiously. What? That money cannot buy the one thing I've been searching for all these years, trust. And you've given me that freely, without even realizing it. Anjali looked down at her diary resting in her lap, her fingers tracing its worn cover. My mother used to say, when you guard your honesty, one day honesty will guard you. Maybe she was right. For the first time, Arjun laughed. Not the polished, restrained laugh of a businessman, but a genuine one that filled the car with warmth. And for the first time, Anjali smiled back. That night, as she tucked Mira into bed, the little girl hugged her tightly and whispered, I'm glad Papa found you. Anjali's eyes stung with tears she fought to hold back. Perhaps, for the first time in her wandering life, she was no longer lost. Christmas Day dawned slowly, painting the sky with streaks of orange and gold. The snow that had blanketed the streets the night before now sparkled like diamonds under the pale morning sun. Inside Arjun's mansion, warmth hummed through the walls. Fireplaces crackled. The aroma of fresh bread lingered in the kitchen, and for the first time in years, laughter echoed through the halls. Anjali sat on the edge of the large bay window in the living room, gazing out at the snow-covered garden. She was dressed in a simple sweater Arjun had given her, soft, woolen, and more comforting than any piece of clothing she had worn in a long time. Her hands curled around a steaming mug of cocoa, and her heart brimmed with emotions she couldn't quite name. Arjun walked in quietly, carrying a small tray with pancakes and fresh fruit. Breakfast is served, he announced with a gentle smile. His son, Arav, followed closely behind, holding a paper crown he had made for Anjali out of gold wrapping paper. For you, Arav exclaimed proudly, placing it on her head. Because you're our Christmas queen. Anjali laughed softly, though her eyes grew moist. She had never known what it felt like to be celebrated, to be seen not as a burden but as someone special. She looked at Arjun, who was watching her with an expression that was both tender and protective. They sat together at the table, sharing food and small stories. But as the morning light grew stronger, so did the weight in Anjali's heart. She knew kindness when she saw it, But she also knew that this world had a way of snatching away happiness as quickly as it gave it. When Arav ran off to play with his new toys, Anjali turned to Arjun. "Why are you doing all this for me?" she asked quietly. Her voice carried both gratitude and fear. "You barely know me. I don't deserve this kind of care." Arjun set his fork down and looked at her earnestly. "Because no one deserves to be left in the cold. And because I do know you, Anjali. Maybe not your entire past. But I see your strength, your honesty, the way you smile at Arav as if he's your own. That's more than enough." Her lips trembled. "But people, they leave. They change their minds." Arjun leaned closer, his voice steady, almost a vow. "I won't. Not this time. I've seen too much loneliness in my life, and I won't let it steal from me again. And if you'll let me, I'll make sure it never steals from you either." The words sank into her soul like sunlight breaking through the darkest clouds. For the first time in years, Anjali felt hope stir, fragile but real. She looked at Arjun, his steady gaze, and then at Arav's laughter ringing through the halls, and something inside her whispered, "Maybe this is home." And so, with Christmas bells chiming faintly in the distance, the promise of a new tomorrow was born. Not from wealth or luxury, but from the quiet miracle of two lonely hearts finding their way to each other. Snowflakes drifted slowly outside the wide bay windows of the mansion, glistening against the golden glow of the chandeliers. The house was no longer silent and lonely. It rang with laughter, warmth, and the sound of a family being reborn. Arjun stood near the fireplace, his heart swelling with a peace he hadn't known in years. Just weeks ago, he had been a man who had everything money could buy but nothing that truly mattered. Tonight, as he looked across the room, he realized how completely his life had changed. On the couch, Anjali sat with Arav curled against her side, his small arms wrapped around her as though she'd always been there. She read aloud from a storybook, her voice soft and melodic, the very sound of home. The boy's sleepy smile told Arjun that his son had finally found the motherly love he had been yearning for. Arjun's chest tightened as he thought back to that night, Christmas Eve, when he first saw her bent over a trash can, searching not for herself but for food to help another desperate woman. What kind of heart could be so selfless even in its own poverty? That night, he thought he was rescuing her. Now he knew the truth. She had rescued him too. As the clock struck midnight, marking the arrival of Christmas Day, Arjun crossed the room. Anjali looked up at him, her eyes shining with a mix of surprise and tenderness. "Anjali," he said, his voice low but steady. "I thought I was giving you shelter, but you've given me a home. You've shown me what family really means." Her lips trembled. "Arjun, I don't deserve any of this. I was just a woman searching through garbage, trying to survive." He reached for her hands, holding them firmly. "You were never just that. From the moment I saw you, I knew you were different. You were strong, brave, and kind even when life gave you nothing. That's worth more than all the millions in my accounts." Arav stirred sleepily and looked up at them. "Papa, is Anjali going to stay forever?" The question pierced Arjun's heart. He glanced at Anjali, whose eyes brimmed with unshed tears. Slowly, he sank to one knee before her, his son watching wide-eyed. "I don't want another Christmas to pass without you by my side," Arjun whispered. "Not as someone I helped, but as my partner, my love and Arav's mother. Anjali, will you marry me?" For a moment, silence wrapped the room, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Then Anjali's tears spilled over, and she cupped his face in her trembling hands. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, Arjun, with all my heart." Arav squealed with joy, throwing his little arms around both of them. "We're a family now, a real family." The three of them embraced, wrapped not just in each other's arms, but in a bond forged through struggle, compassion, and second chances. Outside, the church bells rang, carrying across the snowy streets, as if blessing their union. And so, on that Christmas morning, the millionaire who thought his wealth defined him, and the homeless woman who thought her past made her unworthy, found that love, pure and unshakable, was the greatest treasure of all. Together, they stepped into a future where no one was alone, where every Christmas would be filled with laughter, warmth, and the miracle of family.